Okay, I guess now we can go into today's very interesting double feature. It could have been a triple feature, but for some reason, I have no idea when, if ever, Everything Everywhere All at Once will be anywhere around here. There's a theater out of town that has it, like, as a coming soon, but it's not dated, so who knows. But we still have these two, so let's go ahead and start with Sonic. Which is obviously the sequel to the movie that came out at the beginning of 2020. I think before everything just went to shit. And it was surprising when that came out because based solely on the fact that it wasn't that bad, and some people even loved it, and the idea that there was just a lot of positivity around it because of that whole thing where the really scary Sonic animation happened, and it was in the first trailer, and then everybody freaked out, and they actually took the time to go back and change it rather than just say, "Oh, deal with it because we don't care." And so that just the whole idea of like being able to do that for the people that would like really appreciate it, just kind of had this positive energy just radiating around the movie itself. So that on top of the fact that the movie was not bad and was quite entertaining, just a lot of good stuff came out of that. So now we have this one, feels like it happened so quickly, because I remember when I heard news that it was like done filming. I had just heard that it was like even like it was still a question to me if it was even being made yet or not, and then I just heard, oh no, it's already done. It's in post production. So it feels like the whole thing just happened really quickly, and then you heard about the Idris Elba casting and stuff like that. And now here it is. So soon, just a little over 2 years, like 2 years and 2 months later. Um, and yeah, we do have the inclusion of Knuckles. And I talked about when I talked about the first movie, how I grew up on the first two games, and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which is humorously referenced here. Which I can't remember if the Mean Bean, the coffee shop, was in the first movie or not, but but still, it is a nice reference. So in a movie that you could say is full of fan service, stuff like that is still appreciated, for the most part. But because I grew up on really just that and the first two games, Knuckles was a character that I knew about. Like, I knew what he looked like, and I knew what his name was, but I didn't really know anything much beyond that, because my main focus back then was just the first two games. And I was interested to find here because when I first heard about Idris Elba's casting, it was like, is that... I wonder how fitting that is, or I wonder if it's just because Idris Elba's a famous name and a famous voice. But he does, from very little I know about this character, he was surprisingly fitting. He reminded me of, like, Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy with a little bit of Plankton from SpongeBob. I know that's a weird combination, but yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was getting, to where he's strong and powerful, but he's also kind of an idiot, and he also takes things a little too literally. And then just and a lot of things seem to baffle him that are actually quite easy to comprehend. And he found like a middle ground there without being too much of either one of those things. So it wasn't like it was too... Like, if they had made him, like, too stupid or something, then this could have gone downhill. But I feel like they found just enough of balance to make the character really watchable, so there's that. Especially with his... I don't know if you could call it his chemistry with Carrie, but his sort of counterpart to Dr. Robotnik also worked really well, I thought, for the most part. But going before that, when we see Sonic kind of in his element now, I guess you could call it, after the events of the first movie, it is kind of fun and refreshing to see this scene where he is going around Seattle trying to stop crime and be a superhero. And typically, once you reach a second movie, it's like everything about your character is kind of improved, and they're better now than what they used to be at what they want to do and all that. But no, in this opening scene we see that Sonic is terrible at being this sort of makeshift superhero, which is a really funny joke also. And so, obviously, once he comes back, we realize that, yeah, we still have James Marsden and Tika Sumter here. And one of the things about the first movie was the idea of mixing Sonic and his world in with this live action world, and how that seems to kind of be the cop out of big studio movies. Is for some reason they feel a need to shoehorn these human characters into it. Obviously, Carrie doesn't count there because Carrie can obviously blend in with a background this, animated. So he really feels like he belongs. But everything, like, clearly, like the Marsden character, it felt very reminiscent of him being in Hop and stuff like that. But there's still enough between him and Sonic that it does surprisingly work, the relationship between the two of them. Like in the first movie, and more so when it carries over in this one. And they seem to find a way to kind of answer that, because obviously now that we've brought in Knuckles, and we've also brought in Tails, as was alluded to in the mid-credit scene of the first movie. And so it's like, okay, this is kind of more what we wanted, was the characters that are actually from this world. And they seem to double down on that even more by giving Marsden and Sumter an excuse to basically leave the movie. Where it's like when you watch the Chipmunk movies and you can see Jason Lee is in them less and less and less as they go. It kind of felt like something like that. For a while, they probably, while it's obvious, it was almost like them kind of being pushed out of the movie. It was also something you kind of wish they'd stuck with a little more than they did, because the human characters do eventually come back at like the halfway point and are as prominent as they were the first time around. So enjoy it when it's just like these otherworldly characters, while it lasts, which is like basically the first half. And Carrie in there as well, because we do have the moment where they go to Hawaii for her sister's wedding. So Sonic is left home alone with the dog. This is before any of the other characters show up in his life. And he gets, the risky business scene. They don't play the song, but he does the slide in, so it's this weird combination of we're kind of doing that reference, but we're also kind of not. Which is especially interesting because this is one of those movies that has, the references are frequent. Where it's one of those cases where it's not really some clever joke at another movie, or bringing it in and like turning it on its head or something. No, it's just empty references. The laziest shit that you can do. But that's not too. That doesn't take away from too much. It's just clear that, and so they kind of got lazy on some of the jokes, I guess you could say here, because a lot of them are also more childlike, I guess you could say, which I think is what the beauty of what Carrie's presence is here. Because what Carrie does so well here, and what he did so well in the first one, was he does have a lot of like slapsticky humor going on, where it is stuff that would entertain like 5-year-olds and under. But he also finds a balance where he's more like, he'll either do or say something that's much more universally funny to anybody. And so he kind of finds that where it's like, this stuff is for the kids, and then this stuff is for just everybody else. And he DreamWorks his way through this movie, basically. And to great success, because Carrie just owns this part. And it is kind of funny where, now that he's changed his appearance and looks a little more like the Dr. Robotnik that we know, at one point he's referred to as the Monopoly guy, which it's Ace Ventura fans, it's very funny to see him on the receiving end of that, this time. But there's also moments in here that are just like classic Carrie, like we saw, because that was the big draw. One of the big draws of the first movie was it was Carrie being Carrie again for the first time in what felt like a long time, where he was back to like his really classic self and was finding that again. And there's like at one point here he does that whole bit where he plays guitar on his leg and lifts it, and it's like, that's such an old classic Carrie bit. It was like, I loved seeing that here also. So so yeah, anytime Carrie was here, like I said, there was a balance going on, but he was able to find it, which is great. Because if he had gone more in just like the sort of kid friendly jokes area, the character could have been unbearable. But he knew what he was doing with that balance, so we're good. Just even like the way he says some lines or the way he words some things, just feels so natural to him, but also just kind of hilarious. Even just the way he delivers a line, can be perfect. And his relationship with his henchman, I suppose I could take or leave. It is very funny when we see his henchman for the first time. in the movie, and he's basically spent this whole time just longing for him. Is a very funny joke, but he does. The henchman is a character that kind of eventually runs out. What's the word? Uh, he overstays his welcome. That's what I'm looking for. But somebody that doesn't overstay their welcome, because usually you would think, bring in other characters or sidekick characters. Like let's say you go into Sonic not knowing the other characters at all. And it's like, if you were to hear that Sonic has a sidekick now, not knowing who Tails was, you would think, oh, that's... I don't think this is going to go... Normally that kind of thing doesn't go well when you start introducing more characters and stuff like that. And sometimes these characters might try to overshadow the other character, and the writers might try to do that, and it gets all... A lot of bad decisions are made. But not only is Tails a character we've been waiting for since the first movie, but the way they've done Tails here is so... I think Tails is my favorite character in the movie. And a shout out obviously to Colin O'Shaughnessy doing the voice work again. And yeah, like I said, this is something they could have completely and totally botched. And it's like, it almost feels like it goes back to what we were talking about with the first movie, where it's like, so much, like, just in concept, this could have been such a failure. But while they don't, like, there's some cases where it's like, oh, you probably could have done this better. Like, maybe you could do a little bit without the human characters. But there's also stuff that they, like, completely knock out of the park. And I feel like Tails was one of those things here. I just really love this character, and I love that they did him as much justice as they could with a story like this. And the reason I word it like that is because it does get to a halfway point here. Because this movie, for seemingly no reason, is over 2 hours. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes, which seems excessive. But I was wondering, like, if they have the energy of the first movie, maybe they can use it. But the trouble is the first movie was just barely over an hour and a half. So you can see where the filler is in here. Here we go again. For like the third or fourth video in a row now, I have to criticize a moment where the movie just stops dead in its tracks for people to dance or sing. In this case, it's dancing. And here it's like a dance fight of sorts, at least that's what they call it, but it's still just basically pausing the movie for everybody to dance, which is a waste of time. In any movie, really. But there's also a moment where I was talking about that eventually the human characters start to come back and be more prominent again after we kind of shoved them out of the movie for a while. And you'll notice when they were out of the movie had a lot of energy going on, where it was just the animated characters and Carrie. And the animation, by the way, is also very well done. While they don't look like... Because they still look like video game characters, but at the same time they look real enough that you could, like, reach out and feel, like, their fluffiness. Like, it's very weird, but it is still really well done. And once we get to a point here, when the human characters come back, it feels like it gets into the reverse, and now it's like they're trying to push out the animated characters. Like, once the human characters come into it, Tails is unconscious for like half an hour. which certainly was not the way to go. And then you can sense it getting a bit worse, whether it be the characters or the writing or anything. The humor all kind of starts to go downhill once we get to this wedding. Because, for a number of reasons, but it starts with this really stupid scenario where Sonic has given them a ring so that they can get, because he used the ring to get them directly to Hawaii, and then they can use the ring and come directly back from Hawaii. But the trouble is that this ring Sonic's ring has gotten mixed up with the wedding ring. So there's a whole thing there, and instead of Marsden realizes this, and he goes up, and obviously his future sister-in-law already hates him, and or current sister-in-law, I can't remember if they're married or not, but who cares, but he goes up there to the altar while it's going on, and instead of saying, hey, we accidentally mixed up rings, because you need more slapstick stuff and more hecticness, he just goes up to the altar and says, I need the ring, and he won't explain why. He just keeps saying, I need the ring, I need the... and that's dumb in itself, but then what makes that even dumber is that that becomes very irrelevant very fast. That becomes irrelevant in like 10 seconds from this particular point. When all hell kind of breaks loose in kind of the worst way. Um, and a lot of folks, suddenly from here for about the next 15 minutes, it feels very, very long. I don't know what the exact time frame was, but um, the sister that was about to get married, gets a focus here for a very long time, and and it's like you so long you almost forget that you're watching a Sonic movie, and it's just watch this character do stupid shit, watch this character do all this other stuff and cause all this havoc, and it's just like the entire movie detours just to watch the sister. She has Tails' backpack, and it's got all of his shit in it, and she's like going through it and using all of it, and that's what it just devotes a large chunk of time to that, with almost nothing else going on. And I said this is during that period where Tails is unconscious, and then Sonic's barely there, and so this is a reminder of why it was better when you just kind of ousted the human characters. And it's like I'm not saying take them out completely, but it's like these are not the characters that you're here to see, and the way these scenes play out is a blatant reminder as to why. And so that was baffling that they did that. And then they basically do it again when we get towards our ending, because we have the Adam Pally character who kind of takes over as sheriff when Marsden goes to Hawaii, and they reintroduce him. He was in the first one, I'm pretty sure, right? He was, because he was forgettable then too, I guess. But they introduce him like once or twice just to remind you the character exists, and then it's like towards the end he just suddenly comes back and it's like, oh yeah, this is him doing this now, and he gets involved in the climax in a bit. And it's like between the Adam Pally scenes and the sister wedding scenes, I feel like both of these things could have just been cut out completely. And there you go, you're back to our old runtime. It may be just a little over an hour and a half, which is probably where we should have stayed. But for some reason, these two characters dicking around that have hardly anything to do with anything at all, that aren't entertaining or funny, and certainly not as entertaining as the characters we were watching, way too much time is devoted to that, and that's why the movie just barely breaks 2 hours. I wish it had been for a good reason, but it was not at all. So that's a real stain on this movie too, because it's really entertaining up to that point, and then Pally really waters down the climax, and the sister just completely annihilates the middle here. So that's it has a really hard time recovering from that, unfortunately, because like I said, once we do have the characters that we'd rather be watching, it does find entertainment value again. There is some stuff here that I feel like would be bigger, more effective fan service, I guess you could say, if, like, let's say if I didn't just grow up on the first two games mainly, and I had more of a stake in Knuckles. Seeing Sonic and Knuckles like collide for a fight would have probably been a bit like, it's one of those moments where you can tell, even if you're on the outside looking in, you can tell that's like a big moment. But I didn't really feel much of anything towards it, since I didn't really, have much of a connection to Knuckles before this movie. But there's stuff like that. But there's also stuff like Marston's ringtone will be very familiar, and there's a moment where like Sonic's drowning and he like breathes in like an air bubble. And I'm pretty sure that's from the games, right? I feel like I remember that image of Sonic like sucking in bubbles underwater. So there is stuff like that where it's like some of it's really small like that, where you'd have to have grown up with the games or something to notice them. But there's also stuff that's like pretty blatant as well. But it's and then eventually we finally do get Robotnik in a giant robot, which I'm sure is another thing we've all been waiting for. So there's stuff here that's pleasing. Some of it feels like it's almost like they're doing it out of, obligation or something, rather than it suiting the story as best as it possibly can. But then again, how much of a story we're really working with here. It's we expect, to see Sonic and Robotnik fighting over, an emerald, and that's what the plot is. So, I don't know how much you can really ask of it, but one thing I would have definitely asked was the total and complete deletion of at least a couple of characters that feel completely irrelevant and are just eating up time. And I don't know that I would have put a dance off in it either. So, but if you take those out and you have a lot more focus on our three animated characters and Carrie, then we might have had something pretty close to great. But as it is, it's some good stuff, some entertaining stuff. That's constantly getting watered down by stuff that just really doesn't need to be here at all. So it's conflicting. This movie is, but I was saying they seeing the Tails is something that I'm really pleased with, and the way they handled Knuckles, I really like. Not being familiar with the character, I found a lot of humor in him also. So the way he says the line like, "Oh, these are stairs" or whatever it was, just like I said, just all it takes sometimes is just one line, and if it's delivered just right, it can be perfect. And Carrie can always find that, and Idris Elba found that quite a few times as well. So. And always a shout out to Ben Schwartz with the energy that he brings to Sonic's voice, pretty much being like it's kind of hard to imagine another voice as far as these movies are concerned. Now that we've seen them, but yeah, so that's pretty much how I feel about this. Just kind of down the middle, I guess. So let's go to a completely different movie. Ambulance, which is Michael Bay's new movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Abdul Mateen II and Asa Gonzalez. And if you didn't know that this was a Michael Bay movie, you will know very, very quickly. We've got a whole lot of Michael Bay shots. We've got, sunrises, and we've got lens flares, and we've got, shots that sweep around people. Not only that, a couple of verbal references that are a bit on the nose. There's... they go through dialogue of The Rock, the, fuck the prom queen line, they talk about that, and I think Bad Boys was referenced once. And there's probably more if you look for them, but... so I feel like that right away, The Rock conversation is pretty early, so I feel like that's almost kind of setting the tone. Where we do have stuff where we're introduced to the characters, and the intros are pretty solid, but it's also one of those cases where it might be the movie asking us to take it more seriously than it probably should be. But then in true Bay fashion, we eventually get to a point where we can tell he's probably not asking us to take it that seriously. So, but we have to have our character points that set it off. So we have, Mateen's character who kind of sets up that his wife is sick and he's trying to do all this insurance stuff, and they're not going to be able to have money and stuff like that, and he's a Marine and stuff like that, but he can't get, anything to help with this. And he's got a brother by way of adoption through Jake Gyllenhaal, and Gyllenhaal is obviously an office rocker, bank robber. But the thing that's interesting about this that I found, just the way it kind of puts the dynamic into perspective, is that when you think about them being adoptive brothers, there's that thing where if one of them is a good guy and one of them is a bad guy, it's usually the case where, like, the core family, that's a part that took one of these people in, typically it would be the core family is part of the good guy, and then the brother that would come in that was adopted would be the bad guy because he's kind of like the outsider. And it's the opposite, where it was... Mateen's character was basically a good kid that turned into a good guy, and it's Gyllenhaal's entire family, the one that adopted him, has really, disgruntled past, where the reason Gyllenhaal is the criminal that he is because his dad was an even more dangerous one before him. So I thought that put the dynamic into a really interesting perspective. And then we've got Asa Gonzalez, who is a paramedic, they're basically trying to set up as kind of cynical and doesn't have too much emotion about what she does. She just does it for the job and stuff like that. And then, of course, naturally, these lives will eventually all collide once we've had a big Michael Bay heist scene. And what's interesting about that also is that we pretty much go right into it. much quicker than I was expecting. Because we get our character intros, but then like within this morning, where Matane says like oh, I'm gonna go to Gyllenhaal and I'm gonna tell him that I need a loan or something. Well, he's keeping things from the wife, but his plan is to go to Gyllenhaal and basically get a loan from him. And Gyllenhaal says, "Well, I got this thing going on," and that's the thing. And they go right from there to there, and the movie's on from there on, and it doesn't stop the whole time. Um, and there's a couple of movies that come to mind, pretty much any chase movie or something like Speed will come to mind as far as like the non-stop nature of it, and then having to go through all these different obstacles. And of course, naturally, they also have a dying cop in the back of this ambulance that they are responsible for. So, in order to not completely increase their potential prison time, should they be caught, they're going to try to keep this guy alive by way of Gonzalez's character. There's a lot going on with this setup, but the way it's all, we naturally get to that point where we're introduced to all the different characters and then this happens. It doesn't feel like there's too much build-up, but yet it feels like all of this is properly set up once it kicks in, which I really liked also, because this is another one where it's like 2 hours and 16 minutes, which sounds really long, and it does eventually get to that point, but with that, you would think there'd be a point where it was how much time is it to set it up versus when it's actually the movie that you've come here for. And it's able to do that. It's able to get to that quickly without necessarily sacrificing character work. For the most part, I mean, a lot of characters start to come in throughout it. Like a lot of comedy relief characters, and we've got... I'm pretty sure that was Garrett Dillahunt as the captain. And then Cara O'Donnell comes in as somebody that's with the... I think he was with the FBI, but he knows Gyllenhaal's character also. And there's a lot of characters and a lot of stuff going on, as you would expect from a Bay movie. A lot of frenetic energy going on. But, like I said, the concept is set up so well that it never really feels like too much. Even there's a lot of lens flares and stuff like that, but also, the way that it's shot, I could see people seeing as, maybe a bit obnoxious, where we're, the camera's going up and down buildings for seemingly no reason, but then, when it comes down, it seems to, fly over the streets, and then we get scenes where, the camera is basically chasing the ambulance itself, and we get these really quick shots, where it kind of feels like we're within the momentum of what's going on. There was this poor old man that was, 4 seats over from me, and about 45 or 50 minutes in, he got up, and he never came back, and I don't know that he would have probably thought it was bad. It may just have been too intense, if I had to guess. So, I kind of wasn't surprised at all, but it's also the case where if you come in, say, knowing it's a Michael Bay movie, you are getting a Michael Bay movie, for sure. And a lot of cases that could be oh, that's, when you hear Bay's name, it can go one way or the other. It could be this really, awesome action movie that's really fun, or it could be an absolute piece of shit. And I feel like this is one of the good Bays, personally, anyway. But, because I don't think, Six Underground is... Because as I was watching, I was trying to think, what are the good Bays, and what are the shitty Bays? And because typically when you think shitty Michael Bay, you think, Transformers. And it's as long as he does a standalone movie is when he's pretty good. But then I remembered Six Underground exists, and it's no, it's not that. It's just... Because I think his last great one was Pain and Gain, which was 9 years ago now. 9 years ago this month, I believe. So we were due a pretty good Michael Bay movie, where he's able to utilize, much like Pain and Gain, he's able to utilize his excessive style in a way that suits the story and suits the sort of frantic nature of it, which is going to amp up the suspense even more. And so I was actually on board with just how sort of wild and insane a lot of these camera moves were. When it might seem obnoxious in another movie, I felt like it was more or less fitting. Like I said, put us in that sort of momentum that the whole movie's in. And when the characters are really tensions are really, really high and characters are starting to lose their minds, we can feel that happen. It feels like we gradually got to this point. where characters are kind of starting to snap on each other a little bit. And it's crazy, and we get a lot of chases with a lot of crashes and stuff like that, to the point where it feels like there's quite a bit of inadvertent fourth wall breaking here, where there's the captain is observing that a lot of these cars are crashing, and the person that's there says, "Yeah, this is a very expensive car chase," and it's like that's a little on the nose, but yeah, but yes, in multiple, like, as a real life scenario and as a movie, yes, this is an expensive car chase. It seems. Um, but that's one of those things where it's one of those movies where you just kind of have to decide if you're going to run with it or not. Even in scenarios like there's a point in time where they have to perform an impromptu surgery on this cop, and the cop starts to wake up, and Martine's solution to this is to knock him out, like, physically, so that they can perform this, and it's like, there was laughter in the theater, because I believe it's supposed to be a humorous moment in the movie, and you might also have your people saying, like, okay, what are they going to do about his brain damage now? But that's the thing, is you have to decide if you're going to run with it or not, and I was willing to just kind of go with it. And it's... I mean, once it gets closer to the end, it does start to feel like we're taking more leaps than we were, and even at the beginning, there's stuff like how Gyllenhaal is supposed to have been this bank robber since he was 17, but yet he's very generous with identifying information about himself and his team at the beginning, seemingly casually. So just throwing his real name around and stuff like that, and I don't know, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some clever moments also, despite just having to kind of run with what's going on. Like, there was a moment at the beginning, right before the heist, where they're on an elevator, and there's a very funny use of masks, when you think about, today and stuff like that and where we are. And it's and stuff like that works, and where the comedic moments in this don't feel as blatant, like when you see other... I mean, there's some stuff like the dog thing was kind of weird, but when you see, Bay movies, or really any kind of big blockbuster, it's almost like the movies stop for a comedic moment and then they keep going. And this one kind of keeps... Like, when those moments are in there, they come and go so fleetingly that it never really stops the momentum if they have, like, a comedic moment or a comedic line here and there. So that was appreciated. And I was saying, despite, Bay's reputation, like, post-Transformers or something like that, he's still able to... and despite shit like 600 Gram, which looked like absolute garbage from the editing to the action and all that, but he still can really stage a great, not just an action scene, but chase scenes specifically. Like, obviously one of his trademarks is like the highway chase, where it's like, despite the Transformers reputation, I will always stand by that the highway chase in the third Transformers movie is pretty great, and the highway chase in Bad Boys 2 is practically iconic. So that's where the more kind of Bay I feel like we're getting here. The one that, like, actually knows how to make an action movie and an action scene. And knows just the right amount of frenetic energy to put in it without being too much... Well, getting us into the excess of the situation without it being too much. And that's probably the best we could have asked out of this. I would say the main issues would be... there's a couple of crashes here and there that look like, video game graphics, but they're, once again, fleeting. And talking about that runtime, yeah, there's probably a couple of endings too many. Where I get the idea of how, like, they have one ending, I guess you could call it, that, like, really establishes the characters, like, further, and establishes the lengths they're willing to go for each other. And then that kind of sets up how they approach where we get to one of our other endings. And it's... Yeah, and of course, we have characters here that have to... We have 3 different characters here that have to get wrapped up, so... there's that also, but... Yeah, it does start to feel that length when we get to, like, the last 20 minutes or so. where it feels like they could have not necessarily taken scenes out, but gotten through scenes a little quicker once we got to our climax, since we have multiple ones to go through. But that's pretty much how I feel about this one, I think. So, yeah, so it's worth checking out, especially if you're into Bay when he's actually on point and knows how to use his strengths and what he can do. So, yeah. So the next thing I think is going to be, I guess I should finally talk about the Lost City and a couple of other things that went to streaming, and then we'll go from there. We're going to have our, discussion on the player, the three of us and the whole group thing, and I'm assuming that Owen and Ashley have their individual stuff brewing as well. So, yeah, so until whatever the next thing is, I think that's going to be it.